Welcome to the 12th episode of Ahargana. I am still drifting on the river Kaveri in a coracle boat. The sun is setting behind me. The birds are coming back home to roost. You can hear their chirpings. And you can see the golden light of the setting sun. I am still on the river Kaveri. I am still drifting along the river, except I changed the direction of my camera so that it includes my face this time. And I did that because we are getting on to a topic which is reasonably or probably the most complex topic that I have handled so far in the Hindu calendar. And that is the topic of Adhika Masa. So I am planning 3 episodes starting with this one, where I will discuss the concept of Adhika Masa. To start with, the basic idea of Adhika Masa is that there are 2 yugadhis, sauramana yugadhi and chandramana yugadhi, and they do not synchronize. Or rather, there is a Saura Varsha and the chandramana Varsha, and they do not synchronize. So what does the word synchronize mean? That is the topic of this episode. I illustrate to you what synchronization or lack of synchronization actually means. To describe it in words, in 2021, both Chandramana Yugadhi and Sauramana Yugadhi occurred within 2 days of each other. April 12th was Chandramana Yugadhi and April 14th, as always, was Sauramana Yugadhi. But in 2022, that changed. Sauramana Yugadhi stays on April 14th, but Chandramana Yugadhi moved to April 1st. That means the gap between them increased. And this year, 2023, you will see that Chandramana Yugadhi comes on March 21st, whereas Sauramana Yugadhi stays on April 14th. So a much bigger gap between the two. And this widening gap between the two is the absence of synchronization. In 2021, they were very synchronized because there was just a 2-day gap. In fact, instead of thinking of only Yugadhi and the entire year, I will show you in this episode every month, month by month by month by month, the 12 months of 2021. You can see that we start with a 2-day gap, and that gap keeps widening month after month after month. Because if the Yugadhi is synchronized, then the beginning of every Masa should be synchronized, Chandra Masa and Saura Masa. But that synchronization keeps kind of regressing, and the gap starts increasing, and that is the topic of this episode. But does that continue all the way eternally? The gap keeps on increasing, increasing, increasing? No, it does not, because if that happens, then you should find Chandramana Yugadhi falling from April to March to February to January to December to November. Never happens. You always find Chandramana Yugadhi happens in April or March. April, March, April, March, April, March. So in the next episode, I will show you a pattern which emerges, that Chandramana Yugadhi falls back, and then jumps forward, leaps forward. And this happens again and again and again and again. I will show you a 19-year pattern where Chandramana Yugadhi falls back, comes forward, falls back, comes forward, falls back, comes forward. And 19 years later, it comes back again to April 12th. And finally, in the 3rd episode, I will show you how it comes back, how it leaps forward, because of the introduction of an extra month, Chandra Masa, Adhika Masa, inside a specific Chandra Varsha. And I will tell you and show you in the animation as to when that Masa is introduced and what is the criterion for introducing that Adhika Masa. So this is a reasonably complex topic. You will find that it may be a bit of a beja fry. Your brain will go round and round and round, a little bit like this coracle boat is also going now. But if you stay with me, I will do my very best to explain it clearly in such a way that you can understand with those animations. Once again, I am putting in my best effort. The results are not in my hands. But I believe that given the animations that I am putting together in this episode and the next two, you will get a fairly clear idea of Adhikamasa and why that is required. And if you remember, we started this whole series, what triggered me to do this analysis of the Hindu calendar was the very fact that there are two yugadhis. So this next 3 episodes is all about a story of 2 yugadhis and how they are not staying together, how they drift apart, come back, drift apart, come back, drift apart, come back. And why do they come back? One of them stays steady, sauramana yugadhi, chandramana drifts back, comes back, drifts back, comes back. And that is the story that I am going to explain in the next 3 episodes. So first episode is all about the synchronization or lack of synchronization. So I am going to roll the animation now. Take a look. Okay, let's get started. In this episode, we will take a very close look at the concept of synchronization of the chandramana and the sauramana calendar, specifically synchronization of the Chandra Varsha with the Saura Varsha, and each Chandra Masa with the Saura Masa. And we need to do this because it is an absence of synchronization that necessitates the introduction of a Adhika Masa. So, what exactly is synchronization? So, you know the general term of synchronization is if 2 or more events are happening at the same time. For example, synchronized swimming in the Olympics, the swimmers are repeating the same movements at exactly the same time. Now, here in the Hindu calendar, we have Saura Varsha and Chandra Varsha. So, to start with, we will examine whether they start at the same time. So I am going to reuse an old video which we saw in episode 3, which I used to explain the 12 chandramasas that make up a Chandra Varsha. So that same video I am using again, but with some additions. For example, I have added these red plus marks here on the screen, and this is nothing but Sankranti points. And I have also mentioned here in brackets the Sauramasa name. So at this point in time, on April 12th, 2021, it is Falguna Masa and Meena Rashi, Meena Masa. Now, this is the end of Falguna Masa because this is Falguna Amavasya. Amavasya in the Amanta system is the end of a Masa. Amavasya Anta system. And I follow the Amanta system, and also for Adhikamasa it is necessary to stay with the Amanta system. You will see why that is required later on. So Falguna Masa is ending here. The moon is positioned here, that green circle. In fact, everything in green pertains to the moon. Now I'm going to roll the animation. Take a look what happens. It's a very short slice of animation. The moon moved from here to here. At the same time, the sun was somewhere here. It moved to the Meshadi position. So Mesha Sankranti happened. And when did Mesha Sankranti happen? It happened on 4/14/2021. And it was just 1.99 days after Falguna Amavasya. That's the meaning of this notation here, plus 1.99 days after Falguna Amavasya, after the Amavasya. So everything in red pertains to the sun. So, and you know that Falguna is the last month, so Chaitra is about to start. So this is really indicating the beginning of a Chandra Varsha, a Chandramana yugadhi. And this is indicating sauramana yugadhi, you know that. So the two yugadis are happening with a gap of 1.99 days. Now, it would have been ideal if they happened at the same day with zero gap. That would be perfect synchronization. But just 2 days difference is perfectly acceptable. So I would say that they are in sync. The two yugadis happen to be in sync in 2021. Now, if this is confusing to you, don't worry, because I'm going to show this 12 more times. So that is 11 more times. So that is 11 more opportunities for you to understand this. So let me roll the animation now, but transfer your attention to the moon. So this is Chaitra Masa and Mesha Masa. And here comes Chaitra Amavasya. So Chaitra Masa is ending here. Now let me roll the animation a little bit more. Again it stopped because Vrishabha Sankranti happened. And this time Sankranti happened 2.95 days after Amavasya. So once Chaitra Amavasya happened, Vaishakha Masa started. And 2.95 days after that, Vrishabha Sankranti happened, so Vrishabha Masa started. So once again, the two Masas, Vaishakha Masa and Vrishabha Masa, started with just a gap of 3 days, 2.95 days to be exact. So it still seems to be in sync, not really a problem. Let's continue. Now Vaishakha Masa is in progress. It's still Vrishabha Masa, of course, until the next Amavasya is going to happen. Now Vaishakha Amavasya has happened, so Vaishakha Masa is ended here. And a little bit more animation. Now Jyeshta Masa has started, and then Mithuna Sankranti has happened. But now you see the gap is almost 4.5 days. So what started as 2 days, that gap has now become 4.5 days. So Mithuna Sankranti happened 4.55 days after Vaishakha Amavasya. So I can still stretch a point and say, yes, 4.55 days, it's still in sync. But it gets worse. So now we proceed forward. Jyeshta Masa is in progress until Jyeshta Amavasya is going to happen now. So this is Jyeshta Amavasya has happened here. It's still Mithuna Masa. And now there. Karkata Sankranti happened. Now the gap has become 6.41 days. So what was 2 days gap has come close to 6.5 days gap. So this Sankranti happened 6.41 days after this Amavasya. So the beginning of these two Masas, Saura Masa and Chandra Masa, Ashada Masa and Karkata Masa, was different by 6.41 days. So Karkata Masa started 6.41 days after Ashada Masa started. So the beginning of these two Masas are diverging. They are falling out of sync. Continuing further, Ashada Masa is continuing until Ashada Amavasya will happen somewhere here, there. So that is Ashada Amavasya. And you can already see the Sankranti is so far away. Here the Sankranti was right there. There was no gap at all. Whereas here the sun now has to move from here to here for the next Masa to start. Let's make it move. So there the sun is moving. And now Simha Sankranti finally happened 8.23 days after Ashada Amavasya. In other words, Simha Masa started 8.23 days after Shravana Masa started. Because Ashada Amavasya means Ashada is over and Shravana starts from there. So what was 1.99 days has become 8.23 days. So it is getting worse and worse and worse. The synchronization is degrading. or they are falling out of sync. So next Shravana Amavasya is here, and follow the sun now. Finally Kanya Sankranti 9.77 days later. Proceeding further, Bhadrapada Masa is continuing, Kanya Masa, and here is Bhadrapada Amavasya, and now the sun is moving, and now Tula Sankranti 10.84 days later. What started with just a 2-day gap, see how bad it has become now, 10.84 days gap. So they are falling out of sync, the two systems. The two Saura and Chandra Masas and Varsha are falling out of sync. Masas are falling out of sync, as you can see here. And this obviously means the Varshas are going to fall out of sync. Continuing further, we are in Ashvina Masa. And there is Ashvina Amavasya. And where is the next Sankranti? I am still waiting for it, still waiting. There is the next Vrishchika Sankranti, 11.41 days later. And continuing further, Kartika Masa is happening, and now Kartika Amavasya there. And now I am following the sun, waiting for the Sankranti. And there is Dhanu Sankranti, 11.58 days later. It's not regressing too much here. It moved from 10.84 to 11.41, 11.58. Kind of stabilizing, you could think, but not exactly. Because after this, here comes Margashirsha Masa Amavasya, and we are waiting for the Sankranti. There is Makara Sankranti, 11.58 days later, so it didn't increase. Here also it was 11.58, now also it's 11.58. But it doesn't stop there, it continues falling behind some more. Pausham Amavasya is here. And I am waiting for Kumbha Sankranti. There is Kumbha Sankranti. It became 11.65 days later. Now I am waiting for Pausha Amavasya. So there is Magha Amavasya. So there is Magha Amavasya. And here is the Sankranti, Meena Sankranti, 12 days later. So what was a 2-day gap has now become a 12-day gap. Once again explaining it. So what this number really means is, first Falguna Masa started, and 12.03 days afterwards Meena Masa started. This was not the case right here at the beginning. Chaitra and Mesha started with just a 2-day gap, whereas Falguna and Meena, the starting is differing by 12.03 days. And finally, coming towards the close, back to Falguna Amavasya, April 1st, 2022, and waiting back to Mesha Sankranti, always on April 14th, 2022. So we completed the entire loop, the entire year. Observe the final state at the end of the year. So at the beginning of the year, Falguna Amavasya and Mesha Sankranti were just 2 days apart. At the end of the year, Falguna Amavasya and Mesha Sankranti are 12.85 days apart. So what was a 2-day gap has become a 13 days gap. So the gap has increased by 11 days. Putting it differently, in 2021, Falguna Amavasya was here on April 12th. Moon's physical position was here and the date was April 12th. A year later, Falguna Amavasya has fallen behind here. And the date too has shifted earlier to April 1st, 2022. And the difference, 11 days. That's why a 2-day gap became a 13-day gap, approximately. 2 plus 11, 13 days. And this 11 days gap, this falling behind by 11 days, that 11 days is exactly the difference between the orbital period of the moon and the orbital period of the sun around the Earth in a geocentric model. I have repeated this multiple times in earlier episodes. The orbital period of the Moon is 354 days for the full year to finish a synodic orbit, Amavasya to Amavasya 12 times. Orbital period of the Sun, you all know, is 365 days, 11 days difference, and that 11 days difference is what you are seeing in front of your eyes here. The Falguna Amavasya, which was here, has fallen back. The Falguna Amavasya, which was in sync with Mesha Sankranti, just 2-day gap, is now very much out of sync. It's become a 13-day gap. And it is this absence of synchronization which gets worse and worse and worse year after year after year that necessitates an Adhikamasa. And why do I say it gets worse year after year after year? Because remember, next year, 2022, is going to start with this 12-day gap and then go round and round and round 12 times, and you will find Falguna Amavasya will be somewhere here. In fact, it will be this year, 2023, it will happen on March 21st. So what was in April has fallen back to March. And if we do nothing to control this in our calendar, if you don't do any adjustments, it will keep falling back year after year after year, Falguna Amavasya. And then you will find Chandra Varsha beginning, chandramana yugadhi, happening in March, then it will happen in February, then it will happen in January, then it will happen in December, and it will keep going like that. That is one way to do a calendar. But that is not the way our ancestors followed. We did an adjustment called Adhika Masa. I will talk about that more in the next episodes. But in the immediate episode, I'm going to illustrate to you what happens year after year after year after year. So this is in detail one single year. In the next episode, I will show you multiple years, what exactly happens. And I will show you just Falguna Amavasya, because that clearly shows at the end of the year how much synchronization was lost. But that's for the next episode. So I will stop this episode here. You can replay this multiple times. If you find this confusing, you can go back and forth and take a look at it. But this absence of synchronization, this whole idea of synchronization and the absence of it, is very important that you should understand that. So with that, I conclude this episode. Thank you for your patience in watching this, and thank you very much. Now you understand all about the synchronization or absence of synchronization between a Chandra Varsha and a Saura Varsha. What started as a 2-day difference between the two at the start of the Varsha ended up becoming a 13-day difference by the time you came to the start of the next Varsha. That means 11 days got added. And that's exactly the difference between the synodic orbital period of the Moon and the orbital period of the Sun around the Earth in a geocentric model. So in the next episode, we will start digging deeper into what happens to this difference as the years go by. Does the difference build up more and more and more, and the two start falling apart eternally? Yes, they do. But in our calendar, we do what is called as an intercalation by introducing an extra Chandramasa, Adhikamasa, that pushes the Chandramana Varsha or Falguna Amavasya back as close to Mesha Sankranti as possible. So we don't allow that difference to build up, we forcibly introduce a 13th month. In fact, in the Islamic calendar, they don't do that. So Islamic New Year, the 1st of Muharram, keeps on shifting. It can come anywhere on the Christian calendar, it doesn't matter. But in our calendar, we force an intercalation. But in the next episode, I will show you how this falls back and comes forward, falls back and comes forward over a 19-year period. So you see the pattern which is happening there. It's a little bit irregular pattern, but there is a pattern. And after that, in the episode after the next one, I will finally show you the actual introduction of a Adhika Masa. And that is indeed the most complex episode that I am making. So thank you very much for watching this episode. Thank you for your patience, for staying with this series so long. And as always, I request you please forward this link to people in your network so more people become aware of the astronomical basis of the Hindu calendar. So once again, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you again next time in the next episode, and until then, take care and bye-bye. ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಹಿಂದೆ ತಿರುಗಿ ನೋಡಿ ಕ್ಯಾಮರಾ, ಮುಖ ಬರುತ್ತಾ ನೋಡ್ತಾ ಇರಿ, ವೇವ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಒಂದು. ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು.